Bechtel. It's not exactly a household name, is it? Unless your household designs and builds massive infrastructure projects, then, well, you probably have a framed photo of a Bechtel project on your mantelpiece. Since the late 19th century, this American engineering and construction firm has become a titan of industry. We're talking dams, bridges, nuclear power plants, entire cities. You name it, Bechtel's probably had a hand in building it, but with great power, as the saying goes, comes the potential for, shall we say, complications. From the Hoover Dam to the Channel Tunnel, Bechtel's fingerprints are on some of the most ambitious engineering feats in human history. Their work has quite literally reshaped the planet, but this legacy isn't without its critics. Bechtel has found itself embroiled in controversies, facing accusations of environmental destruction, human rights abuses, and of course good old-fashioned crony capitalism. Buckle in, folks, because we're diving headfirst into the world of Bechtel, where engineering marvels meet ethical quandaries. Let's start with a little jaunt to Boston, shall we? Specifically underneath it, because that's where you'll find one of Bechtel's most infamous projects, the Big Dig. Officially known as the Central Artery Tunnel Project, this engineering odyssey aimed to alleviate Boston's infamous traffic congestion. The plan? Bury a highway underground. Simple, right? Well, about as simple as performing open-heart surgery on yourself while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. The Big Dig became a byword for cost overruns and delays. The initial price tag, a modest $2.8 billion. The final bill? Try a gut-wrenching $14.6 billion. That's enough to make your wallet spontaneously combust. And Bechtel? They were right in the thick of it, managing a significant chunk of the project. But here's where it gets sticky. Bechtel wasn't just accused of mismanaging the project, they were accused of profiting from the chaos. The Big Dig became a stark example of the complexities of Bechtel's legacy. Yes, they helped build something remarkable, but at what cost? And who ultimately footed the bill? Now let's fast forward to the present, shall we? To a land of scorching deserts, unimaginable wealth, and a thirst for futuristic mega-projects. We're talking, of course, about Saudi Arabia and its crown jewel of ambition, NEOM. Imagine a city built from scratch. A technological utopia powered by artificial intelligence and renewable energy. That's the dream, at least, behind NEOM. And who better to help realize this ambitious vision than Bechtel? But scratch beneath the surface and you'll find NEOM is built on more than just sand. Human rights groups have raised alarm bells about the displacement of indigenous communities to make way for this gleaming new city. There are concerns about the environmental impact of such a massive undertaking in an already fragile ecosystem. And then there's the whole issue of Saudi Arabia's less than stellar human rights record. For Bechtel, NEOM presents a dilemma. It's a chance to be part of something groundbreaking, a project that could redefine urban living. It's also an association with a regime known for its authoritarianism and human rights violations. It's a high-risk, high-reward gamble, and only time will tell what the ultimate payoff will be. If there's one thing we've learned in the 21st century, it's that disasters are big business. And no, we're not talking about those disaster movies starring Bruce Willis. We're talking about the very real, very profitable industry that springs up in the wake of hurricanes, earthquakes and wars. And guess who's often first on the scene? You got it. Our friends at Bechtel. After Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, Bechtel was awarded billions in government contracts for debris removal and reconstruction. Similar stories played out in Iraq and Afghanistan, where Bechtel secured lucrative contracts for rebuilding infrastructure destroyed by war. This is where things get ethically murky. Critics argue that companies like Bechtel are essentially profiting from human misery. They point to inflated contracts, shoddy work, and a lack of transparency in how these disaster relief funds are spent. Is Bechtel a lifeline in times of crisis or a vulture circling the wreckage? The answer, like most things, is complicated. There's no doubt that Bechtel's expertise is valuable in disaster zones. But the potential for exploitation and profiteering is undeniable. Section 5. Environmental concerns, a legacy of extraction. Let's face it, building massive infrastructure projects rarely comes with a pristine environmental track record. And Bechtel, for all its engineering prowess, is no exception. From dams that displace communities and disrupt ecosystems to power plants that spew pollution, Bechtel's projects have often left a sizable environmental footprint. Take, for example, the Belo Monte Dam in Brazil. This controversial hydroelectric project, which Bechtel was involved in, has been blamed for flooding rainforests, displacing indigenous communities, and disrupting the delicate balance of the Amazon ecosystem. Similar criticisms have been leveled at Bechtel's involvement in fossil fuel projects, from pipelines to power plants, which contribute to climate change and air pollution. Bechtel argues that it's committed to sustainable practices, pointing to its investments in renewable energy and efforts to minimize the environmental impact of its projects. But critics argue that these efforts are often too little, too late, a case of greenwashing to appease public concern while continuing business as usual. Section 6. The revolving door, politics and power. It's no secret that the worlds of government and big business are often intertwined, but in the case of Bechtel, the relationship is particularly cozy. Over the years, Bechtel executives have moved seamlessly between the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. and the company's boardrooms. George Shultz, for example, served as Bechtel's president before becoming U.S. Secretary of State. Caspar Weinberger held top positions at Bechtel before serving as Secretary of Defense. This revolving door raises concerns about conflicts of interest, undue influence, and the potential for government contracts to be awarded based on connections rather than merit. Critics argue that this close relationship between Bechtel and the US government gives the company an unfair advantage and allows it to operate with a level of impunity that wouldn't be tolerated from others. Section 7. Global development or exploitation. Bechtel loves to tout its role in global development. And to be fair, they've been involved in projects that have brought electricity, clean water and transportation to underserved parts of the world. But critics argue that Bechtel's definition of development often aligns more with the interests of its shareholders than the communities it claims to be helping. They point to projects that have displaced communities, exploited workers, and benefited corrupt elites, while doing little to address systemic poverty and inequality. The question of whether Bechtel is a force for good or a driver of exploitation in the developing world is complex and depends on whom you ask. But one thing is clear, the company's legacy is far from black and white. Section 8. A legacy under scrutiny. So, where does this leave Bechtel? They built some of the most impressive structures on Earth, but they've also been accused of cutting corners, exploiting workers, and damaging the environment. They've worked hand in hand with governments, but they've also been accused of benefiting from cronyism and a lack of transparency. In recent years, Bechtel has faced increasing scrutiny. Journalists, activists and communities impacted by their projects are demanding greater accountability. The company is being forced to confront its legacy and answer tough questions about its practices. Whether Bechtel will adapt to this changing landscape or continue with business as usual remains to be seen. Section 9. Conclusion. Building a better future. The story of Bechtel is a microcosm of the challenges and contradictions of our globalized world. It's a story of engineering ingenuity, but also of environmental degradation. It's a story of economic progress, but also of social inequality, and it's a story that's still being written. As we move further into the 21st century, companies like Bechtel will continue to shape the world around us. The question is, what kind of world will they build? Will it be a world where profits are prioritized over people and the planet? Or will it be a world where sustainability, equity, and accountability are the guiding principles? The answer ultimately lies in the choices we make today.